Hey, remember that time that lady commented on one of our videos? If we don't spank our kids, that we're raising
School
criminals.
shooters is
School.
what she
That is
said.
actually what she said.
To be
School
specific,
shooters. Crazy.
have a day off.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you for loving me.
I love you so much.
Welcome to the Chubb House. This is part one of why we don't hit our kids.
We're not normally controversial, or we try not to be online.
Right.
However, we do not spank our children.
It's not easy not spanking our children because we both grew up being spanked.
No, it is not easy.
And we at one point did spank our kids, but we no longer do. So for the record, our oldest child is 11.
Mm-hmm.
And they turned 11 in December, and our youngest child is 3.5, and he's never been spanked. So there have been no spankings of a kid in our household since 2020. We have a son who is more busy than our other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I came home and Cierra's just frazzled, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? She's like, this kid, he's just everywhere doing everything all the time. He's always getting into stuff. He's always doing this. He's always doing that. And I'm like, why are you so frustrated? Just spank him. And you said what?
I said, if I spanked Langston every time he didn't follow directions, it would literally be child abuse. Like, throw me under the jail, purely for the amount of times that I would have to smack him. Like, it just, and I remember one of my younger brothers being similar. Like, I have 3 brothers, and we were all spanked for sure. But that like middle kid, like the second to last one, at least for my parents' children, he just, like, you could smack him and he would just do it over and over and over. Like, it had almost no effect. And not that he wouldn't cry. He would cry, but then would literally go right back to doing the same thing he had done previously. And I was not about to repeat that type of cycle in my house with my kids.
So that same kid would then start to punish himself when we would yell at him, or when we would address some behavior with him, right? Even when we stopped spanking him, he would still for a while
go on for a little bit,
punish himself, and before we even could do anything, right? So we realized, like, oh man, we got to teach this particular kid that he's valued, and he won't learn that lesson if we keep spanking him every time he does something. So that was like a big catalyst into us learning how to, what lots of people call it, gentle parenting.
Mm-hmm.
We would probably call it conscious parenting.
Mm-hmm. Or more like intuitive,
right?
Yeah.
Or intuitive parenting, just because not that gentle.
I don't think gentle parenting is a bad term, because I think being gentle with children is how we should respond to children, because they are children.
But most people, when they hear gentle parenting, think that
off.
means that you don't discipline your kids or teach them
Correct.
how to conduct themselves appropriately. And that's just not true.
Yeah. One of the things that's hard in parenting is that you want to create space for your kids to be honest with you about things, which is very difficult if you're the one always coming down on them with a hammer constantly. I know that for myself, and just thinking about myself and my relationship with my mother, and then other people that I know and their relationships with their mothers, I want to make sure that the lines of communication are open, and that my kids always feel like they can come and tell me things that are important, or things that they're afraid of, or things that they may not think are fair, in a way that we probably never had the space to do. I think there is a lot of the reasons that we, and like our generations before us, any type of questioning to a parent for any reason at all, under any circumstances, was considered talking back.
Yep.
Which normally resulted in getting slapped, hit, screamed at. Yeah, like that. Specifically with women and young girls, that can be like a problematic way to deal with anyone questioning any type of authority, because it creates in my opinion, within young girls, the idea that their voices are not valuable, that they shouldn't interrupt any type of authoritarian figure in their life. And we do know that abuse and mishandling of children, and specifically young girls, can come into play when they feel like it's not appropriate for them to say that something isn't okay. And while nothing obviously crazy is happening in my house, if they're not safe to do it here, they're definitely not going to do it out there when they're confronted with someone who's crossing their boundaries, who's being inappropriate with them, who's just being unkind or belittling to them. And so that, again, was one of the caveats for me that I was like, I really need to make sure that my kids feel like they can come to me and also address things that they think maybe I'm doing that's unfair. And in the idea of like gentle parenting, and this idea that that means you don't discipline your kids or that you're completely hands off, it's like honestly more work, in my opinion, than spanking your children. Because if my child misbehaves and I'm someone who uses corporal punishment to smack their kids, and to be clear, shame off you, we're not shaming anybody for how they parent their children. Obviously, how people parent their children is their own choice, and whatever you're comfortable with is what you should do. But I think we need to take into account a lot of other things. So we're just trying to bring some light to that information because it's hard. And there is such a stigma around gentle parenting, and the fact that that means that you just hands off, let your kids do whatever they want. Let them talk to you however they want. That's not how that happens.
Also, I want to make sure that I say, if you do not, as a parent, give your kids the ability to set their own boundaries, then they'll have to do it in their 20s, 30s, and whenever it is that they learn to do that. And it is going to be hard and crippling for them to do that. You are supposed to be the person or the people who prepare them for life and life's journey. And so if they never get the opportunity to speak truth to your power, right, they'll never do it in their workplaces. Yep. They'll never do it with their friends when they're trying to create boundaries.
College campuses, teacher exchanges.
It just won't happen. So starting now is a way that you are going to equip them to be able to be everything that they're supposed to be, and not be essentially what Cierra and I became to a degree, especially me, people pleasers, because that is a toxic thing to become. So we talked about why we started gentle parenting. Let's talk about some steps that you can take, that we take, to help you to stop spanking your kids.
One thing I do want to say about gentle parenting, especially when you are trying to be a more conscious parent, is that you have to do a lot of policing of yourself.
Yes.
And that's the reason that I said I think it is much harder than just spanking your kids. Because if your child misbehaves and you smack them or spank them or whoop them or whatever you call it, and then they stop doing the thing you don't like, they haven't learned that that thing is a bad thing to do or a not safe thing to do or an inappropriate thing to do. They've just realized that if they do it in front of you and you see them do it, they're going to be punished physically for that action.
Correct. Also, I want to speak to the idea of emotional intelligence. If you show your child that it's okay to freak out at the slightest inconvenience of something, whatever that is that's causing you to spank them, they don't develop a sense of emotional intelligence. So how can you expect your kids to have it at their age, and here you are 35, 40, 50, and you can't control your emotions? Make sure you're giving yourself grace when you are gentle parenting your kids and trying to
100%.
teach them how to behave. And what I mean by grace is, as a little kid, if you knocked over a glass of water, your parents would probably scream and lose their shit, right? So you need to make sure that in those moments where you have now been conditioned to lose your mind or be upset or melt down, that you give yourself grace, and so you're able to extend that grace to your kids. Because if you don't address the issues within you, the fact that you're not a patient person, the fact that you hate messes, all of these things that kids are just naturally conditioned to do, if you don't give yourself the grace, you'll never be able to give it out to them accordingly. And even though messes stress you out, and even though chaos stresses you out, you have to kind of sit with it and get comfortable and just say, this is what raising kids is. If you don't reframe your identity around what raising kids actually is, then you're going to live in a constant state of chaos instead of just saying, no, raising kids is making messes. Raising kids is having to repeat yourself. Raising kids is having to create boundaries for them and for me so that I can be successful. That is what raising kids in a healthy way actually is. So accept the mess and start to redefine why you're stressed.
And your brain is actually fully developed.
Right, and your brain is fully developed.